Nestled on an Orono hill, in nature's forested gallery that surrounds Lake Minnetonka, forms and shapes that require another thoughtful look. Anything but a destructive touch. But in the summer of 2008, workers began breaking apart the art. The home known as the Winton Guest House. It was heavy-handed work under the skillful touch and guidance of Larry Stubbs.
Move it back 4 or 5 feet.
Of Stubbs Building and House Movers.
We'll move anything from an outhouse. We don't like to move too many of those, but anything that needs moved, we're interested in moving it.
This job, moving the art to a new gallery of sorts.
Where have you seen a house built like this? And if it were just demolished, nobody else would see it.
If it were truly a piece of art that hangs on a wall, you'd never destroy it.
Kurt Woodhouse bought the property in 2002.
Take her up.
He decided the secluded but historic guest house needed a more public home and donated it to the University of St. Thomas.
This is educational. That's what St. Thomas is about. And it's good for the community. It's good for preserving history.
And what a history.
It was a great adventure.
Former owners Penny and Mike Winton wanted a guest house that would complement their home, the so-called Philip Johnson House, named after its famous architect. They chose Frank Gehry.
We also began to realize that we were really working with a master. We just had to learn to swing with him.
I spent a lot of time on it. We took a lot of models.
Frank Gehry recalls how he arrived at the artistic design that ultimately became the Winton Guest House.
So what they were trying to tell me is, how do we build a building next to the Philip Johnson building that doesn't look like it's subdividing? And I finally said, well, if it's a sculpture, you wouldn't have a problem with it.
A sculpture design influenced by the still life work of Italian painter Giorgio Morandi.
A sculpture is kind of a heavy trip, right? But then the Morandi thing made sense.
What you have to pick up on is that everything rotates around the central tower, which is the living room. And it rotates around in kind of a pinwheel.
Minneapolis architect John Cook still has the wooden model.
As a young architect, which I was at the time, you're always looking for that aha moment. And when I first saw this model, for me, that was an aha moment.
Cook helped make Gehry's design work in Minnesota's harsh climate. The project helped shape Cook.
It was a game changer in my career. I started to see how architecture could be done a little differently.
Cook clearly sees art in the design.
When you view this guest house from certain angles, that you see nothing but sculpture. And that vantage point is from the Philip Johnson courtyard.
Penny Winton's aha moment came with removal of a hedge separating the homes.
Frank seemed to be so completely focused on the guest house and its shapes and its energy and so forth. And yet when the hedge came down, you knew that his mind was on the main house too. I ran to the phone, I said, they make music together.
Yeah, I knew what I was doing.
Time magazine listed it among the best work of 1987.
Projects like this make Frank Gehry one of the most creative American architects that have ever lived.
Splashes of Frank Gehry's architectural touch can be found around his hometown, Los Angeles, including the Norton Beach House in Venice and his critically acclaimed home in Santa Monica, the eye-catching Chiat Day office building, also in Venice, and a pillar for future attorneys, the Loyola Law School. But far from the West Coast on the Mississippi River's east bank, Minnesotans, at a glance, can see Gehry's work in the Wiseman Art Museum. In fact, his firm designed the Wiseman's expansion. Gehry traces his involvement with the Wiseman back to the Winton project. a guest house design that has skylines in mind.
The idea of a city that's built with different pieces that could address the scale of the city.
The Skyline Still Life, which is a 2-bedroom guest house, is made up of 6 different pieces.
It started with Philip Johnson saying in a lecture years ago that the hardest thing to design were one-room buildings. I was looking for the moment of truth, like my artist friends had to face the canvas. And architects always have these excuses, you know, functional this and that and that. And I was trying to get to the purest place.
That purest place is built on individuality.
So I made each room a different thing, and then put them together in the still life.
As Frank would say, they're just intended to kiss each other.
That created a wonderful kind of energy to it. And there was a push-pull.
Go about halfway.
That individuality ultimately helped Larry Stubbs' crew separate the still life pieces room by room. Even the living room tower had to come off as an individual piece for the long trip ahead.
It was built in pieces. We had to be able to move it in pieces.
The mostly nighttime moves began in July 2009. Historic, heavy pieces like the stone bedroom
Somewhere around 60 ton.
required several hours just to get to the property gate.
Watch that side for the trees.
A high wire act with obstacles all around and no rushing it.
Clear!
Care is required when handling art, especially when it's heavy.
Not much faster than you can walk as a rule.
The roughly 110-mile, piece-by-piece move from Orono to the University of St. Thomas Gehry Center in Owatonna spanned summer, fall, and winter, 8 months in all. The light at the end of the long move came on an early March morning. The tower arrived last. Months of battling weather, floods, and closed roads finally over. Move accomplished.
Good. Great to have the last piece here.
Summer 2010, crews began preparing the new homestead for Frank Gehry's guest house. In late July, it was literally downhill for that stone bedroom that hitched a ride with Larry Stubbs as it lumbered toward the finish line.
Got about 6 feet.
Like every other inch, slow and careful, but this piece arrived at its new home safely.
Slack her down. That's about it, Sam. It's good from Highway 12, right?
Each room faced a similar trip before reassembly.
We can figure out when we want to caulk it. Yeah. We'll get everything set to go.
You're ready.
Okay.
Sam Woods of Casey Grosbeck Construction got the job of reconstruction.
We've tried to place it in oak wood, similar to what it was before. It was on a hill looking down on a lake before. We've oriented it so it looks towards the Gehry house.
Once the house was on stilts, crews then built the new foundation, which of course is not exactly a rectangle.
If you did the foundation first, you'd never get it to match up. And with the foundation up, they'd never get the house over the foundation. It might take longer this way, but it's a lot easier and it's the right way to do it.
If there was a topping off ceremony in this house move, it was the return of the tower in the fall of 2010.
Here we go.
Crews hoisted the 27-foot structure in the air to set it in place. Frank Gehry's guest house back together once again. A new home, a new future, and a new purpose. University President Father Dennis Deese.
It is extremely valuable to stretch the imaginations of our students, to have a variety of exposures to significant artistic and architectural works. The Gehry House will certainly add to that.
A school year's worth of work remained, and then some, to restore the architectural art.
Kind of a cool job to work on, just because of what it is.
Inside, crews gave a facelift to transform the guest house into an exhibit about itself. July 2011, Owatonna looked more and more like home for the guest house.
And this is the view that the Wintons had from the terrace of their main house. So
Victoria Young, exhibit coordinator and St. Thomas professor, marvels at the Wintons' former view.
And that's when the building really looked like sculpture.
Young, an architectural historian, sees so many learning opportunities in Gehry's work for the public and students.
It's one thing to live in a house like most of us do that has 10-foot ceilings throughout, and they're box-like rooms. But when you get into this space with that 35-foot tower in the living room, it's a completely different understanding of what space can do. And that's the big thing that Gehry did for architecture.
Young also sees the guest house as part of a larger, living, historic still life.
What if this place, Owatonna, becomes kind of an architectural center? And what if the center is here on the Gehry campus?
Beyond Gehry's work, the Gehry campus, of course, includes St. Paul architect Edwin Lundy's French Norman-style home. And nearby downtown Owatonna boasts Louis Sullivan's National Farmers Bank building.
People that want to make a kind of architectural pilgrimage now have 3 wonderful pieces of architecture to spend time with.
It could be a study center for architecture, and that would be really interesting.
What's already really interesting is the story behind the guest house, the monumental move, and the promise of a future that will educate and inspire. Fall 2011, the Winton Guest House became a University of St. Thomas schoolhouse of sorts with the ultimate teacher, Frank Gehry.
It's a thrill for us to become the site of this fascinating sculptured house that will be part of our Owatonna Gehry Center for years to come.